16-year-old Amber Cates from Columbia, Tennessee, planned to spend her spring break visiting relatives in Florida. On April 11th, 2004, Amber was dropped off at her mother's house, expecting to leave for the trip that day. Instead, a friend arrived to pick her up, and Amber rode away with him, never to be seen again. By all accounts, Amber was a bright and spirited teenager, but Amber had also begun to test boundaries. She was hanging out with older, questionable friends and is believed to have occasionally indulged in illicit substances. When she vanished that spring day, what initially seemed like a potential runaway case soon turned into something far more troubling. Now, more than 20 years later, Amber's disappearance remains an unsolved mystery that haunts her community and family. In early April 2004, Amber was living with her older half-sister Brenda, who had just become Amber's legal guardian a few days earlier. Brenda was trying to provide stability for Amber after a difficult few years. Their father had died around 1999, and Amber had spent time in foster care and lived in multiple states before returning to Tennessee. That spring, Amber made plans to visit a relative in Panama City, Florida, for a short vacation during spring break. On April 11th, 2004, which was Easter Sunday, Brenda dropped Amber off at their mother Trudy's home in Columbia so Amber could depart from there for her trip. However, Amber never actually left town with any relative. Instead, a 20-year-old man named James Gordon arrived that day to pick her up. Gordon was described as Amber's friend, and possibly her boyfriend at the time. Amber climbed into the car with him, telling family she would be back in 2 days, and the pair drove off. She didn't pack as if she were running away for good. It appeared to be just a quick spring break outing. That was the last time Amber's family ever saw her. When 2 days passed and Amber failed to return or call, her family grew worried. They soon discovered that Amber had never arrived in Florida at all. On April 13th or 14th, 2004, Amber's family filed a missing persons report with local authorities. At first, police considered the possibility that Amber had run away on her own, and based on Amber's history, they assumed she was a runaway. But Amber's family insisted she wouldn't just disappear without contacting anyone. Indeed, as days went by with no word from Amber, signs began to point to something more sinister than a teenage runaway case. Her cell phone showed no activity and her bank account showed no withdrawals, two facts which strongly indicated that she hadn't planned any sort of disappearance. The timeline of Amber's last known movements would soon raise even more red flags. According to what James Gordon told police, he and Amber spent some time together in Columbia on the day she disappeared. Gordon claimed that after he picked Amber up, he later dropped her off with another friend of his that evening. This other friend was 39-year-old Ronald Inzuriaga. It's unclear how well Amber herself knew Inzuriaga. He was a much older man with an extremely serious and violent criminal background. He had been convicted of SA in 1992 and spent several years in prison. What is known is that Amber somehow ended up in Inzuriaga's company after leaving with Gordon. Police immediately tried to locate this man, but ran into dead ends, and ultimately, it took 3 years to track him down. The story Ronald later gave would be the last known trace of Amber. He said that he and Amber went to lunch at a Waffle House on James Campbell Boulevard in Columbia. They then stopped so Amber could buy some hair dye, and finally he dropped her off at a garage that was a local hangout spot for teens. It was at that garage, Inzuriaga claimed, that Amber completely disappeared. Curiously, no witnesses have ever definitively confirmed seeing her at the garage, despite that location being the last place she was reported to be. Over the years, several theories have been proposed by law enforcement, by Amber's family, and by community members to explain what might have happened on that April day in 2004. The earliest credible theory was the idea that she was a runaway. However, given that she never contacted friends and family further at any point in the last 2 decades, and given that her social security number was never used, this is considered unlikely. Another theory that has been discussed is that Amber could have fallen victim to trafficking or some form of exploitation. This idea arose mainly because of Amber's age and the circumstances. She was a 16-year-old girl out with older men, one of whom had an extremely disturbing past. While this theory remains plausible, there's nothing beyond the initial circumstantial evidence to support it. Crucially, despite over 2 decades having passed, there have been no sightings of her whatsoever. By and large, the most credible theory in Amber Cates's disappearance is that she met with foul play at the hands of the individuals she was last seen with. The suspicious sequence of events on April 11th, 2004 raises many questions, and just allow me to very briefly sum up how shady this is. One adult man picks up a troubled 16-year-old girl, then hands her off to another even older adult man, who happens to be on a very bad registry, later that same day. The second man, the dude on the registry hanging around with the troubled 16-year-old girl, claims he simply dropped said girl off, and claims no knowledge beyond that. Oh yeah, and also no one saw her at the popular hangout where she was supposedly dropped off. Literally everything about that detour in Colombia seems suspect. It's also necessary to ask, why was a 16-year-old girl, quote-unquote, friends with a 39-year-old like this guy in the first place? Further, it's been questioned to what extent the two of them even knew each other, with the source that they were friends being James Gordon, another questionable individual. Ronald's background makes it hard not to consider him a prime suspect in whatever befell Amber. To be clear, neither man has ever been charged in connection with the case, and both have denied wrongdoing. Hey everyone, it's Jimmy here with a quick reminder to click the like button and also share this video with your friends and family. Now let's get back to business. On the night of September 11th, 2005, traffic at a busy intersection in Stanton, California, was disrupted by a sudden tragedy. A young woman dashed across the street against a red light and was struck by a car at around 9 p.m. near the corner of Beach Boulevard and Orangewood Avenue. The impact was severe, and paramedics rushed the gravely injured pedestrian to West Anaheim Medical Center, where despite their efforts, she was pronounced dead shortly afterward. She carried no identification, and in the aftermath of the accident, this woman remained entirely unknown. Authorities would come to refer to her only as the Stanton Jane Doe, the nameless victim of a fatal accident who left behind many clues but no clear identity. Investigators at the scene noted that the young woman appeared to be in her late teens or 20s. Her face was intact and recognizable despite the trauma, giving hope that someone might identify her. Yet no witnesses or personal documents could tell responders who she was. As police began their work, the immediate priority, beyond tending to the accident, became unraveling the mystery of this Jane Doe's identity. Who was this woman, and why had no one come forward to claim her? The official investigation kicked off that very night in 2005, setting in motion a case that remains unsolved to this day. From the outset, detectives gathered every available clue from the young woman's person and the accident scene. Forensic examiners documented her physical characteristics in detail. She was around 5 feet 3 inches tall and 165 pounds, with long wavy black or brown hair and brown eyes. Perhaps the most telling clues were the clothing and personal belongings found with the Stanton Jane Doe. She was fully dressed in casual attire, suggesting she had been out and about that day. Notably, she wore a black tank top emblazoned with the words, "Baby Girl," in sequins, along with a white striped shirt over it. Over her outfit, she carried a distinctive jacket bearing the word New York on the front and NY Black Yankees on one sleeve. On her wrists, she wore several silver bangle bracelets. All of these items were carefully collected by the coroner. Inside the small black purse she had been carrying, investigators found more intriguing evidence. Tucked in her purse was a one-day bus pass for Orange County Bus Route 38, dated September 11, 2005, the very day of the accident. The bus pass appeared to have been purchased in the city of Norwalk, in Los Angeles County. There were also several shopping receipts from stores at the Buena Park Mall, a nearby shopping center, all time-stamped on the afternoon of September 11, 2005. In fact, records show she made purchases that day. One receipt from a shoe store around 5:30 for $70, and another from a clothing store around 6 p.m. for a jacket. Finally, in her purse was a damaged CD containing a compilation of reggaeton songs from 2005. Investigators noted that this is a musical genre with roots in Puerto Rico and Latin America, possibly another hint toward her cultural background. Each of these belongings, the bus ticket, the receipts, the CD, painted a partial picture of the Jane Doe's final day. She had likely spent the afternoon shopping and then taken a bus that evening, ending up on foot in Stanton. But none of these clues, as useful as they were for tracing her steps, immediately answered the core question: her name. Forensic evidence was also collected in hopes of a future identification. The coroner took the woman's fingerprints and DNA samples and preserved her dental records. Her fingerprints were run through law enforcement databases, but yielded no match to any known missing person or criminal record. DNA was uploaded to national unidentified persons databases, likewise with no immediate result. A dental examination suggested she was in her early 20s, with one forensic dentist estimating an age range of roughly 21 to 26 years based on her teeth. All this data was entered into official databases like Name Us, in the hope that eventually a match would emerge. Despite these efforts, in the initial investigation in 2005, no leads to her identity surfaced. It seemed she had not been reported missing at the time, and nothing about her fingerprints or DNA had a prior record on file. The case grew cold, and the Stanton Jane Doe was laid to rest in a county cemetery, her headstone lacking her name. Although the trail was initially cold, authorities did not close the book on the Stanton Jane Doe. Over the years, the Orange County Sheriff's Department and Coroner's Office periodically revisited the case, hoping new techniques or information might provide a breakthrough. They compared her profile against countless missing persons reports from California and across the country. By 2013, 8 years after the accident, investigators had formally ruled out almost 150 different missing women as being this Jane Doe. In October of the same year, as the 8th anniversary of the incident passed, Orange County officials made a renewed public push to identify the unknown woman. They released a forensic sketch of her face to the media, hoping it might jog someone's memory. The sketch depicted a youthful woman with curly hair and a gentle expression, based on morgue photographs and the coroner's observations. In parallel with the official investigation, the Stanton Jane Doe case has drawn the attention of amateur sleuths and true crime followers on the internet. Over the years, various public theories and speculation have emerged as people try to piece together who this young woman might have been. One popular line of reasoning is that the woman may have been a visitor from out of the area, possibly from the East Coast or Caribbean. Enthusiasts point to the NY Black Yankees jacket and the reggaeton music CD as cultural clues. Some have speculated that she could have been of either Puerto Rican or Dominican descent. This is based on the combination of her physical appearance, New York branded clothing, and Latin music. If she was from out of town, some have speculated that she may have been staying in a local hotel. If this theory were true, perhaps no family reported her missing because her relatives were in another state or even country, completely unaware of the tragedy. Additionally, some have noted that jaywalking across a wide California boulevard, as she did, might be something a person from out of state would misjudge. People familiar with both Los Angeles and NYC have speculated that a local Angelino likely would have known not to jaywalk at the time and place she did. And, full disclosure here, I ended up going down a bit of a rabbit hole on the jaywalking culture in both cities. In NYC, where I've been and personally jaywalked on numerous occasions, I've seen people pull stunts in traffic which I considered extremely risky, like it was absolutely nothing to them. For any fans of Seinfeld out there, I'm reminded of the scene where George tries to jaywalk a Frogger machine across the street, with disastrous results. I'm much less personally familiar with LA, but according to my research, fast vehicles and very wide streets make it genuinely dangerous to jaywalk. Further, the LAPD had historically been very harsh in imposing stiff financial penalties associated with jaywalking, unlike in NYC, where the cops are very lax about it. Others have speculated that she was a local or recent transplant to the area who may have been estranged from her family. Some have speculated that given the limited amount of belongings carried on her, that this speaks to her being a local resident. Personally, I think this could just as easily support the theory that she left her ID in her hotel or motel while she went out. Others have speculated that she wasn't reported missing because she was living a transient lifestyle. This theory doesn't suggest she was living on the streets, but rather that she may have been bouncing around between homes of friends and acquaintances. As such, her disappearance may not have been noted in any meaningful way, and whoever she was staying with may have just thought she had moved on. Ultimately, at this point, I think this is a case that most likely gets resolved through genetic genealogy. It's unclear to me if the authorities have submitted her DNA to Othram or a similar company for testing, though I suspect they haven't. And the reason I say they likely haven't is that genetic genealogy is new, expensive, and time-consuming. There's no unsolved crime or potential perpetrator associated with solving her case, so I suspect that given limited investigative resources, we won't see a resolution for a few years. Something strange has been happening to tourists who visit Jerusalem. Jerusalem, for those unaware, is considered one of the holiest cities by all of the Abrahamic faiths. A British tourist named Oliver McAfee vanished in the Israeli desert in 2017, leaving behind pages torn from a Bible that referenced Jesus' 40 days of wilderness fasting. Investigators suspect that McAfee, a devout cyclist on a pilgrimage, may have been driven by a rare psychiatric phenomenon known as Jerusalem syndrome. Decades earlier, in 1969, Australian visitor Dennis Rowan set fires at important religious and cultural buildings, believing he was on a divine mission. Other bizarre incidents include acting out specific biblical scenes in the city, or coming to believe that your entire life parallels that of an important religious figure. Though separated by time and circumstance, these bizarre incidents share a common thread. Each stems from an overwhelming religious delusion triggered by the mystical aura of Jerusalem. Jerusalem syndrome refers to a rare psychological phenomenon in which tourists or pilgrims experience acute, religiously themed psychosis during a visit to Jerusalem. The afflicted are seized by powerful delusions, often believing they are prophets or holy figures on a mission. Strikingly, this syndrome has been observed in people of various faiths, and sometimes, but more rarely, even people of no faith whatsoever. Psychiatrists note that a typical episode involves intense religious obsession or hallucinations that resolve after a short time, especially once the person is removed from the region. In other words, someone seemingly mentally healthy can arrive in Jerusalem and suddenly become psychotic with a sacred mission, then return to normal within weeks of leaving. This dramatic transient madness sets Jerusalem syndrome apart from more ordinary travel anxiety and from other city-specific syndromes. Notably, Jerusalem syndrome is not recognized as an official disorder in medical manuals. It doesn't appear in the DSM-5 or the ICD-10, reflecting ongoing debate over whether it truly stands alone as a diagnosis. Instead, it straddles the boundary between cultural phenomenon and psychiatric mystery, challenging doctors to explain why the Holy City can push a few minds over the edge. Ever since psychiatrists began documenting Jerusalem syndrome, experts have proposed different theories to explain it. In a landmark 2000 study, the syndrome was classified into 3 types. Type 1 referred to people with a pre-existing psychotic illness who traveled to Jerusalem driven by their delusions. For example, there was an American man with schizophrenia who believed he was the biblical Samson and felt compelled to move a stone block at the Western Wall. Type 2 included visitors with eccentric or obsessive religious ideas, though not outright psychosis, whose intense fixations were sparked into a breakdown by the city. One such case was an otherwise healthy German pilgrim obsessed with finding the one true version of Christianity. He suffered a psychotic episode inside the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is said to be on the site where Jesus is said to have been crucified. Finally, Type 3 was the classic Jerusalem syndrome. A completely sane person with no prior psychiatric history who becomes psychotic upon arriving in Jerusalem. These people experience a brief and fleeting attack, and then recover spontaneously after leaving. Despite decades of study, Jerusalem syndrome remains an enigma in the fields of psychology and medicine. No one can yet fully explain why Jerusalem, in particular, has the power to unravel certain minds in such a unique way. After all, there are holy sites and pilgrimage sites all over the world, but in general, people are able to hold it together. What is clear is that the condition is exceedingly rare and seemingly requires a perfect storm of factors that Jerusalem conjures up. For those who have experienced it, Jerusalem syndrome can be life-altering, if only briefly. Many return home embarrassed or puzzled by their own actions once the spell has passed.